We will now be going over Chapter 3 in our Foundations book, Communicating for Success. Our learning objectives for this chapter is to explain communicating for success, practice communication skills, conduct the client consultation, handle communication barriers, and following guidelines for workplace communication. Communicating for success is having good communication skills, and this is going to help us build and retain clientele because it helps us figure out what the client wants out of the treatment or what they need out of the treatment. It also allows us to communicate what's feasible or practical so the client has reasonable expectations. And having these effective human relations and communication skills will help us build lasting client relationships, accelerate professional growth, and promote a positive work environment. Some practical steps that we can do to communicate effectively in the workplace is to respond instead of react, up and avoid overreacting or reacting with an eye or for an eye mentality. Don't feel like you have to get back at somebody. Believe in yourself. So when you have a strong sense of self-worth, it's easy to believe in yourself, and doing so can help you feel strong enough to handle a lot of situations more calmly. And sometimes you have to fake it till you make it with this. Talking less and listening more. So listen more than you talk. When you're a good listener, you can focus on what people are saying and respond accordingly. Be attentive. So some clients are more clear about what they want, so you want to be able to give them what they want, or you also have to be reasonable. So you might need to explain to them that you can't reverse their age by 20 years if you give them a facial. And some clients are also a little bit more hesitant or open to advice. If you have an aggressive client, you can ask your manager or me specifically for advice, and sometimes agreeing with them will help calm them down, and you can always follow up by asking what you can do to make the service more satisfactory. Taking your temperature is just basically if you're tired or you're upset, you might interact with clients differently. So no matter what's going on in my life, I try to never transfer that negative energy to my clients. So it's basically just taking your temperature, calming down, making sure you're not projecting any issues to your clients. The golden rules of communication is having a professional demeanor at all times. So you still want to be authentic, but you still might have to tone down some silliness or goofiness, especially for first-time clients. Smile. So smiles are contagious, and it helps spread a positive atmosphere. Answer and talk on the phone with a smile. So if you're smiling while you answer the phone, it sounds a little bit more happy, a little bit more genuine. It doesn't sound so negative. You can probably tell I'm not smiling right now versus now I'm smiling. Doesn't that just sound lovely? Yay! Also, being aware of your body language, so don't cross your arms with listening to clients or coworkers, and nodding to acknowledge their points of view. Listening is one of the best relationship builders. It's a two-way street for communication, so if you're always talking at someone, they'll never be able to include their thoughts or feelings. Speaking clearly is going to show confidence. You want to talk loudly enough so people can hear you, and you don't want to mumble. If you've ever talked to someone and you can't hear them, it's a little bit awkward because you have to have them repeat themselves multiple times. And if you're like me, you kind of get to the point where you're just I don't know if I want to have them repeat themselves. I'm just going to pretend that I understood them and just nod and oh yeah, that's crazy, So you want to make sure you're speaking clearly to kind of avoid that awkwardness. Grammar, so using correct English, it shows intelligence, and it also shows that you know what you're talking about. Effective communication is the act of successfully sharing information between two people or groups of people so the information is understood. So we communicate through words, Voice inflections, so you can have a sarcastic tone of voice, you can have a happy tone of voice or a depressed tone of voice, so that voice inflections is going to affect how people perceive your communication. Facial expressions, body language, and also visual tools like a portfolio of your work. Communication in general is going to ensure that you and your client are on the same page, and giving the client what they want will ultimately make that client a repeat customer or someone that's going to rave about you. When you're meeting and greeting new clients, the first impressions matter and are very important. So it's good to remember to be polite and genuinely friendly, because clients are coming to you for your service and are paying for your expertise. You also want to communicate professionally by using proper terminology and also explain the benefits of the products and services that you're offering. You can earn a client's trust and loyalty by having a positive attitude and introducing yourself and using the client's name throughout the service. Also, if you're in a salon, you may want to introduce clients to other potential providers that do other services, so you can kind of cross-sell them services. And that leads us to our first question. What are the golden rules of communication? The client intake form, sometimes they're called client questionnaires, consultation cards, or health history forms, are very important. Every single client that walks into the building or any spa that you'll maybe work at needs to fill out an appropriate client intake form. They're useful for communication and a business tool, and they disclose the client's contact information, products used, hair, nail, and skincare needs, depending on what services you were doing. So for us, it would be skincare needs, preferences, lifestyle, medications, both topical, so applied to the skin, or oral, so taken by mouth, known medical issues, skin or scalp disorders, and allergies or sensitivities, which we need to make sure we make note of more aggressively. There's also something called the service record card, and this isn't for client use. It's for us or the esthetician performing the service to keep records. So we need to make sure that we update it or note changes every time we see the client. So the service record card would be our SOAP notes. So that's subjective, objective, assessment, and plan. Also, for school, we have something called a release statement with the client intake form that notes that the client acknowledges the services performed by a student under the instruction of an aesthetics instructor, and this is just for legality issues to protect the student and the school. Client intake forms are technically legal documents, so they have sensitive information like the health information of a client, so they need to be kept confidential. You cannot take them home, and they have to be stored in a locked cabinet, and you should never have one out where anyone could just see it. If you fail to keep the client's information confidential, there could be legal ramifications. So it's like a HIPAA violation, so we have to make sure they are out of sight from just any prying eyes. When a client calls to schedule an appointment, we would let them know that we will have to have them come in about 15 minutes early just to fill out an intake form, because we'll need more information before we start their service. This should also give us enough time to do a client consultation. Changes occur between visits, so it's good to always ask the client if they've had any significant changes from their last visit. And if there is, you want to make sure you note anything down on their service record card, or for us, it would be the SOAP notes. I also typically would know if there hasn't been any changes, so it just ensures that you did ask and they said no changes since their last visit. And our question 2 is, what information is on a client's intake form? The client consultation is the discussion with the client that determines the client's needs and how we would achieve those desired results. It's one of the most important parts of any service, and it needs to be done before starting any and all services, even if you've seen them before, because you want to make sure they're getting what they want or you guys are on the same page. When preparing for the client consultation, you might want to have some visual tools. So you could have a pen and their client intake form to go over. You might want some pamphlets or literature or digital images that pertain to the service that they're receiving. You might have some material like a brochure that has a variety of other services that you offer. You might have your portfolio of work, so before and after pictures of people. Product brochures may also be provided by product manufacturers for selling products. In our client consultation area, we want to make sure it's clean and uncluttered. We also want to make sure product containers are kept clean and your station is aesthetically pleasing. So our 10-step consultation method. First, we want to review the intake form, and you might want to reiterate some things on the intake form. So ask them, what are the products that you use on them? Like, you can specifically read them, but you might want to make sure they put down everything. Or just to be clear, you don't have any allergies, or you've never had a bad reaction to anything. These are some of the things that I try to reiterate to make sure they didn't forget anything. Second, you also want to assess. So see what the client wants and needs. Are they looking to help a certain skin condition, or are they just there to relax? That might determine if you're talking through their service and telling them what you're using on them, or if you're going to just be completely silent. Third, preferences. Do they prefer glowy and dewy skin or more matte skin? That might determine whether you use one moisturizer versus another moisturizer. Fourth, analyze. So the client's characteristics. Do you see any immediate skin concerns? You also might want to ask for more in-depth feedback on products that they use and how often they use them, or whether they feel like they're getting good results from them. Fifth, lifestyle. So our client's lifestyle can tell us a lot about what they might need for a service or product. If they spend a lot of time outdoors, we might want to recommend them an SPF. If they're in water a lot or a pool, sometimes chlorine in pools can be a little bit drying, so we would kind of keep that in the back of our mind that their skin type might be a little bit on the drier side. Do they get a lot of sun exposure? How much or how often? We would want to ask more in-depth questions about that. What's their occupation? Maybe they work in a professional setting and wear a lot of makeup. If so, we might want to think about offering them a makeup remover. Skincare habits. So how much time do they have, or how much time do they want to spend on a skincare routine? Not everyone's going to be like me and enjoys the winding down aspect of doing a skincare routine. It's kind of therapeutic for me. Not everyone's like that. They just want to get in and get out. I kind of savor it a little bit, and I have like a whole process. So not everyone's going to be like that. Also, how much money do they want to invest, or how much money can they invest in products? Number 6 is show and tell, and we can use reflective listening, which is basically listening to the client and then repeating in your own words what you think the client's telling you. So this makes sure that you are on the same page and that you really are listening, or you're clarifying what you think that they're saying. Number 7 is recommend. So you want to narrow down what you can recommend based on their feedback from their lifestyle and their skin type. Number 8 is upsell. So if you believe a client would benefit from another service, don't be afraid to upsell them on it. Number 9 is maintenance. So we would want to discuss how often they should use products or how to use products, and you want to give them clear instructions about that. Or also how often they should come back for a service. So do you want to see them every 2 weeks? Do you want to see them every 3 weeks or every 4 weeks? And number 10 is repeat. So we want to review and repeat any key information or key details from the consultation so everything is clear, and you want to take your time and be thorough. And this leads us to question 3. Why is the consultation prior to the service so important? Once you've finished the service with the client and escorted them out, you want to make sure you're writing down your results on the service record card or your SOAP notes. So you would note anything that you'd want to do again, things that you would change or do differently, products that you would change or not use because maybe they had a reaction, or what type of reaction would that be. Also the final results, how their skin overall appeared afterwards. You would also want to include the product that the client purchased, and you would also want to make sure you date and file the SOAP notes appropriately to keep them in a proper place so you can easily find them for the future. Handling communication barriers. Tardy clients can affect the workflow, and making up lost time can be really stressful, especially when you have clients right after. It doesn't feel good when you feel rushed or you're at risk for inconveniencing another person who is on time. So you want to know and abide by your work's appointment policy. Is there a late fee? There might be a limit amount of time a client can be late before you need to require a reschedule. If a client does arrive late and you have time to take their appointment without jeopardizing another appointment, you still want to advise that client of the late policy respectfully, and you don't want it to be a constant issue with that client, so next time you might not be able to do their service, and you just have to let them know that. Eventually, you will learn who's late all of the time, and you might want to even schedule them for the last appointment of the day, or ask them to arrive a little bit earlier than their actual appointment time so you can make sure you have enough time for them. If you are running behind, you can have your receptionist call your clients and inform them so they can either reschedule or just come in a little bit later. Scheduling mix-ups happen. You never want to argue about who's correct. Even if the client's arguing, you want to try to move that conversation from who's at fault and try to just resolve the confusion. So you can also make another appointment for the client and try to make sure you have the correct phone number down so that the appointment can be confirmed. Resolving unhappy client problems. Ultimately, we want the client to be pleased and happy, but occasionally you might come across a client who is unhappy with the service that you provided. How we resolve that situation will determine if they come back or not. So we want to try to figure out why the client is unhappy, so ask for specifics. If it's possible to change what the client dislikes, you can do so immediately. If not, look at your schedule and see if you can fit them in as soon as possible to make an adjustment. If the problem can't be fixed, you want to explain that to them honestly and tactfully. The client might not be happy still, but normally people appreciate the honesty, and you also might want to offer them other options that could minimize the client's disappointment. You should never argue with a client or try to force your opinion on them. Managing differences. Naturally, you're going to attract clients that are similar to you, but once in a while you will get clients that are very different from you. So some things that we should do to keep it professional for everyone is to avoid chewing gum or slang, use please and thank you, stick to professional topics of conversation, so no topics would be religion and politics. You might want to ask how an older client prefers to be addressed for the first time that you meet them. So do they prefer Whitney or do they prefer Miss Sprague? Also, being sensitive about the verbiage that you use when you're talking about aging skin. So you should talk about other factors that make up their skin or their skin type that will help its condition. Getting too personal. So this is one of my getting too personal. So sometimes as you build a bond with your client over time, the client could have a hard time differentiating between what's professional and what's a personal relationship. You're not your client's counselor, you're not their coach, their doctor, or their career or parenting coach. So we want to make sure we're keeping it strictly professional. We want to try to return conversations to a more neutral or service-oriented topic if they start to trail off a little bit. We should always avoid gossip, religion, or politics completely. Some things that you could talk about instead would be books, movies, celebrities, or the weather is kind of a staple. When you communicate with your coworkers, there are some things that we want to keep in mind. So we should treat everyone with respect, regardless whether you like someone or not. Your colleagues are professionals who deserve respect as well. Remain objective, so make every effort to remain objective. Resist being pulled into cliques or picking sides. Be honest but also sensitive. So while honesty is always the best policy, using unkind words or actions at work is never a good idea. So you want to be sensitive and think before you speak. Remain neutral. Again, there might be at times where you're persuaded to choose a side, so avoid taking sides in a dispute. Just remain neutral. Avoid gossip. So participating in gossip can just be as damaging to you as it is the object of the gossip. So we want to avoid gossip completely. Seek help from someone you respect. So you can always ask for some advice about how to proceed and then really listen to that advice. Do not take things personally. So if you are confused or concerned about someone else's actions, find a private place and an appropriate time to get clarification. Keep your private life private. So the work environment is not the place to discuss your personal life and relationships. Communicating with managers. So employees might perceive managers as these powerful figures of authority, but it's important to remember that managers are human beings too. Staff members should support management and the spa that they work in by following the rules and guidelines that are set. Some guidelines that we can follow would be to be a problem solver, so think of possible solutions before you seek advice. Get your facts straight, so make sure the information that you're bringing to your manager is accurate. Be open and honest, so advise the manager immediately if you're uncertain. Do not gossip or complain about colleagues. If you have a legitimate problem with someone and have tried everything you could do to resolve the issue by yourself, then you can go to your manager. Be open to constructive criticism. So the manager is there to help you achieve your professional goals and ensure success. So they will evaluate your skills and offer suggestions on how to improve and expand on your skills. Communicating during an employee evaluation. It's good to take time to review the evaluation. You should approach your evaluation positively because it is there to help you succeed. You may also want to fill out the form for yourself and try to remain objective, so self-reflect. You can write down your thoughts or questions so you can share them with your manager. And when you have your employee evaluation, you can share your self-evaluation and express you're serious about improving and wanting to grow. And at the end, you can thank your manager for taking the time to do an evaluation for the feedback or the guidance. And for question 4, list 5 things to remember when communicating with your coworkers or your classmates in this instance. So the learning objectives we went over was explain communicating for success, practice communication skills, conduct the client consultation, handle communication barriers, and follow guidelines for workplace communication. And that will conclude our lecture for Chapter 3, Communicating for Success.